Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. We've got not one, but two ladies of The View coming up shortly. But first, let's start with Taylor Swift, possibly the biggest pop star in the world today. And she's recently endorsed Kamala Harris, but it's not the first time she's backed a political candidate. Sadly, it appears Swift, who has built a stellar career writing songs about her many bad choices, appears to be what is called a low-information voter. Just have a look at this ill-informed, emotional diatribe about Republican Marsha Blackburn.
Taylor Swift comes out against Trump.
I don't care if they write that. I'm sad that I didn't 2 years ago, but I can't change that. I'm saying right now that this is something that I know is right, and you guys, I need to be on the right side of history. And if he doesn't win, then at least I tried. It really is a big deal to me. She votes against fair pay for women. She votes against the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which is just basically protecting us from domestic abuse and stalking. She thinks that if you're a gay couple, or even if you look like a gay couple, you should be allowed to be kicked out of a restaurant. It's really basic human rights, and it's right and wrong at this point. And I can't see another commercial and see her disguising these policies behind the words Tennessee Christian values.
That's from Swift's 2020 Netflix documentary, Miss Americana. And the nonsense she's spewing there is about Republican Marsha Blackburn. And guess what? Even in her home state in 2018, Taylor's activism failed to move the dial. Marsha Blackburn won with a big majority in Tennessee. Huge. Now let's check in with the mad ramblings of the ladies of The View. And apparently it's opposite day on the program, because despite 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump in as many months and a number of other violent attacks from the left, it is the Republicans and Trump that are to blame. Let's hear this angry tirade from Whoopi Goldberg. Remember when she was likeable and sane?
And also, let's stop this thing. Let's stop this both sides stuff.
It's a bunch, yeah.
Because it's not correct. Right. It is not both sides. It is one clear side. And you can point to many, many reports. You can point to all kinds of stuff that's been reported. You guys have to pull it back. This is not us or them. This is, you got to stop doing what you're doing, JD, and what you're doing, Mr. T, because you are not helping the situation.
Projection and lies, that's all the left have. They accuse their opponents of precisely what they're guilty of. And we have another lady from The View, Chief Nincompoop Ana Navarro, who went on CNN to share more conspiracy theories. She's moved on from the Russian collusion hoax business. Now she's suddenly worried about the folks in Springfield, Ohio.
The problem is that Donald Trump, who I think, if you were doing hurricane categories, he's on hurricane category 5, whereas the other side might be a 2. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are not questioning their rhetoric. Right now, because of their rhetoric, because of what he said in that debate, there's been 33 bombing threats in Springfield, Ohio. That would not have happened but for this false conspiracy theory being spread by the vice presidential and presidential Republican candidate. And those Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, and those students and the people that are victims of these threats and everything that's going on there don't have 24/7 Secret Service. Right? They're on their own.
She forgot to mention a couple of key facts, and I know the View ladies and CNN are allergic to facts, but every single bomb threat was a hoax, and the Ohio governor has confirmed that the hoaxes originated from overseas. I wonder who could be behind these bomb threat hoaxes? Who is the most to gain? Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has been schooling the leftist activists in the US media. Here's one example.
President Biden passed a series of executive actions, and illegal border crossings are now at their lowest levels in about 5 years, so much so that Greg Abbott is no longer busing people to other cities. But let me ask these fundamental questions.
Please.
Will families be separated under your mass deportation?
And again, I do want to answer this question about families and about deportations, but you made this point that border crossings are lower. Border crossings at the southern border are lower because the Harris administration is sending more immigrants through the ports of entry. So instead of coming through the southern border, they're now being flown at taxpayer expense to the ports of entry all over our country. The number of illegal crossings, they're not any lower. They're just shuffling how the people are coming into the country in the first place. And this is very important.
They're able to process them more efficiently, but Greg Abbott's not setting them to other
Kristen,
states.
I don't want a border czar who makes it more efficient for illegal immigrants to come into this country. That's why we have the problem that we have.
And what he said there is 100% accurate. New data from the US Customs and Border Protection shows nearly 530,000 migrants have flown into the US under the Biden administration's mass parole program for countries such as Haiti and Cuba, Venezuela. And the figure is just for June to August this year. Fox News' Bill Melugin reports that another 813,000 migrants have scheduled appointments via the Custom Border Protection One app at ports of entry to be released into the US. And these are all called lawful pathways now. These were created by the Biden administration, so these numbers don't count as illegal crossings. You can see precisely what they are doing here. Joining me now is filmmaker and journalist Ami Horowitz. Ami, that's more than 1 million migrants the Biden admin has allowed into the US via these programs. And they're here to stay. They're not going to be leaving America because authorities admit they just don't have the resources to police those who overstay their visas.
Look, J.D. Vance is very good at this. He is smart. He has a command of the issues and knows how to use them as a rhetorical weapon. But frankly, to me, that underscores the failure of Trump at the debate to effectively use immigration as the necessary rhetorical weapon he needed. He whiffed at it. He used as a stand-in for this important immigration issue this false idea of people in Ohio eating pets. That was a stand-in for immigration when we have all of these data points, these important real data points like the CBP data point, to use to really highlight the problem at the border. That's the problem. What do? We allowed, look, other than admittedly creating hilarious memes, what it did was it allowed the Democrats to reduce the potency of the immigration argument. It basically boiled down the immigration argument, allowed them to deflect it into and change the narrative into a fact check. That is a failure. We cannot focus on those things that are distracting and frankly untrue. Look, President Trump should be running away with this election. The number one and number two issues in the country, the economy and immigration, he has massive leads on. But instead of running away with the election and having a large lead, the lead is actually increasing for Kamala Harris. And it's the Republican Party needs to take a hard look at how President Trump is running this race, because he has a chance of losing it when really this should be a win for him.
We'll get back to the polls and this issue. I disagree with you. Yes, he's not a J.D. Vance. He's not a Vivek Ramaswamy or a Ron DeSantis. He's not a politician who can do those debates in the manner that they would have completed them. But it was 3 against 1. And though this whole cat and dog business has absolutely enraged the left, it has brought attention to the illegal immigration issue and the legal migration issue. And there's focus on towns like Springfield, Ohio, when they were ignored up until then. So I'm not entirely sure that the outcome isn't what he would want. But I do agree with you that, yeah, if he had a J.D. Vance in his ear, he would have been able to just fact check a lot of the nonsense that we heard during that debate in a far more effective manner. Now, I want to ask you about what Hezbollah has suffered in recent hours. 9 people have died and 3,000 have been injured after a coordinated cyber attack on Lebanese militant group Hezbollah saw thousands of pages explode. Arab media reporting that around 500 Hezbollah fighters were blinded in the attack, which took place mostly in Beirut in southern Lebanon and also Damascus in Syria. Members of the terrorist organisation were previously told by their leaders to stop using mobile phones, smartphones to avoid Israeli surveillance. They were handed pages instead. Ami, tell me about how this attack occurred and what we know about it.
Yeah, well, nobody knows for certain yet, but obviously there are a number of theories, and I think those theories are probably true. Listen, one thing the Mossad is known for is ingenuity and creativity, right? That's really what it has. And they have a history of really interesting ways of getting at their enemies. For example, when they killed Mughniya, the Hezbollah leader, Iranian leader, they actually put explosives in his headrest in his car. Sounds easy, extremely complicated. When they killed the engineer, Hamas Ayash, who's called the engineer, who was a leader of creating these IEDs that plagued Israel, they were able to get explosives into his cell phone and use that. What seems to have happened here is that what we think they did was they put explosives into the pagers. Now, I spent time in southern Lebanon, in the Bekaa Valley, in Beirut, and I spent time with Hezbollah. And when I had to contact them, I couldn't call them on cell phones. They didn't have cell phones because they knew they were easily hacked. They were all using pagers. And because they thought that this analog system was harder to hack, and in fact it is. So what we think is Israel did was it didn't go digital, but went analog, found the manufacturer, which was in Taiwan, of these pagers, somehow infiltrated the supply chain, whether in Taiwan, the manufacturing facility, or en route to Lebanon, covertly were able to open up all of these thousands of pagers, put in plastic explosives, reseal them so they couldn't be seen and noticed as being tampered with, and then sat there for we don't know how long until they thought it was the right time to use them, and then remotely access the pagers to overheat, thereby triggering the explosives. That's what the going theory is. It is an incredible coup they were able to pull off. Kind of blows, use that pun with intent, for these Hezbollah fighters who are now going to see their 72 virgins, but frankly have their equipment blown off. So that kind of sucks for them. But by the way, I want to highlight one more thing about this issue. If we take this seriously for a moment, is that it also points out, just a couple of days ago, right before this, the Biden administration was pressuring Israel to stop escalating what's happening in Lebanon. Really? Israel has to stop escalating? Do I have to remind the president that Hezbollah has been bombing the north for almost a year on a daily basis? The bombing is so bad that Israel has had to evacuate the entire north of Israel has been evacuated because they can't live under those conditions. Yet Biden is lecturing Israel that it can't escalate this thing just a couple days before this happened. Shades of when Biden told Israel, after Iran sent 300 missiles and rockets and drones in an unprecedented attack against the state of Israel, what did he tell Israel? He said, do not retaliate, otherwise you will lose my support. This is the situation that Israel finds itself in vis-a-vis this administration.
And so much pressure on the Netanyahu government to come to a ceasefire agreement, even though Hamas continuously refused to really meet any sort of reasonable conditions. The pressure seems to be entirely on Netanyahu as opposed to Hamas, who started this entire catastrophe. Going back to US politics, I want to get your thoughts on this new ad campaign from a conservative group that's targeting illegal immigrants in the US, warning them not to vote in the upcoming election. The Spanish language ads warn non-citizens that voting in a federal election is a crime punishable by deportation. But Ami, the campaign also tells Hispanic voters that it's their patriotic duty to vote, those of them who are citizens. What are the polls telling us about the Hispanic vote? Because it's been a very fascinating exercise to observe how it's gone towards the Trump camp. But I think since Harris was installed as leader, that lead has diminished.
Well, I think one of the great geopolitical mistakes the Democratic Party has made is that look, there's no question that it has encouraged illegal immigration into this country and encouraged Hispanics to come into this country because in their view, they think ultimately when they become citizens that they will all vote for the Democratic Party. And it's true that first generation Hispanics outside of Cubans have been a bulwark for the Democratic Party. But what all the polls and all the studies have shown is that Hispanics are conservative, they're Catholic, they're hardworking, and they have migrated toward the Republican Party over time. And I think it's going to end up being a catastrophe for the Democratic Party. But I want to point something else out about the illegal voting. Look, I think that there's no question that there is illegal voting. There is voter fraud that happens. It happened to me personally. I want to point that out. Now, when I did my voter ID video, the reason why I did that video is because when I went to vote after maybe 6 months after my father passed away, and I voted in Los Angeles, the way it works there is you go, you give your name, there's a book. And in that book, it lists all the names alphabetical order. So all the Horaces were in order. And I saw my father's name was in there, which made sense. He only died a few months before, but his name was checked. And I asked them, why is his name checked? They said, well, somebody came in, gave his name, his address, and they voted for him. That was clear voter fraud. And by the way, I showed the California Board of Elections, never got back to me, never cared. But the important point here is that, look, is there a mass, again, what the Democrats are doing is saying, well, there is no mass amount of illegals voting. That's a falsehood. That's not real. Well, look, it's not real that all the illegal immigrants are voting. But let me tell you something which people seem to miss, certainly the Democrats do, is that in New York City, where I am, the New York City Council and the mayor passed a law for non-citizens to vote, to actually allow them to vote. Only by the grace of the judicial system and the court, they threw that out. But the city is still appealing it, and Mayor Adams is still supporting this law to allow non-citizens to vote. So when you tell me this is not a real argument, this is something that Democrats are in fact trying to pass.
Absolutely. Ami Horowitz, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Always a pleasure.